My name's Amata, and in this Red Gamer Tech video I am here with the usual collection of tech news as well as a small sprinkling of something from Square Enix. However, before I get into that, I just want to say that Paul is on the road to recovery. He seems fairly confident that he'll be back to fighting form in the next couple of days, so hopefully he will be back creating videos, because I know he's eager to get back to it, and I know you guys are eager to have him back. I know you all have missed him so. However, what do I have for you today? Well, I've got a very interesting report from a French website that basically says some interesting stuff about Meltdown and Spectre and how Intel tried to basically keep a lid on it getting public. We also have some Intel patches for the Intel Management Engine flaw that we discussed a while back. We have the Universal Flash Storage 3.0 specs thanks to JDEC. And finally, we have some comments from the Square Enix CEO on games as a service. However, let's begin things with Meltdown and Spectre. Now, this particular report was done by a French website by the name of lemagit, and that's lemagit.fr, but of course there's going to be a link in the description below for your perusal if you want to give it a read. As I said, it is in French, so everything I'm reading is Google translated, but if you can read French, go for it, my friends. My French is terrible. They tried to teach me at school and I was like, I don't understand. Regardless, I have to thank a fellow by the name of Zach Whitaker who actually tweeted this particular report on, well, Twitter. But basically the gist of it is that the MagIT was able to get hold of a confidential technical note which basically indicates that Intel began notifying its partners of Meltdown and Spectre on November 29th, 2017. However, this was under a strict non-disclosure agreements. So basically, they made certain people aware on November, but they couldn't tell anybody because, Intel would probably, be a bit upset with them, shall we say. However, it gets worse from there, my friends. Oh, yes. As that is exactly the day, as you may recall, that the Intel CEO sold his shares. $11 million worth of shares was sold on that exact same day that they said to their partners, hey, there's this really bad pair of vulnerabilities that could bring down tech companies across the world, but you can't tell anybody. But by the way, I'm just going to sell $11 million worth of shares while I'm at it, if that's okay. So, yeah, it's pretty damn shady, to say the least. Now, obviously, Intel have already said in the past, and there's going to be a link to a Gizmodo article on this very topic, that the dumping of the stock by the CEO was unrelated to Spectre and Meltdown. But, obviously, it might not be as simple as it seems. Zach Whitaker also says that the sale was kind of arranged before this all happened, but it is kind of odd how it all kind of lines up and looks shady even if it actually isn't. So that doesn't really change the main crux of things, however, is that it began notifying OEM partners on November 29, 2017 and put them under a strict NDA. So even if you ignore all the share stuff, which in itself is pretty bad and kind of muddies the waters and raises several questions, but even if you put that to the side, you still have this base fact. And obviously we already know that they did stuff like, put Coffee Lake on the market, knowing that this vulnerability was a thing. And as I said a while back in my Canon Link video, they're undoubtedly going to be releasing new processors with the vulnerability, hardwired out of it, as we've kind of said by Intel themselves. And I guarantee you it's going to be a big thing, yeah, it's immune to Meltdown and Spectre, to make the Coffee Lake refresh seem more worth it than it actually is and all that sort of thing. So they definitely, made the situation a lot worse by how they dealt with it, let's just put it that way. And this thing doesn't really help the matters, does it? No. Anyway, let's move on to another Intel related matter with the Intel Management Engine, flaw. So basically, the TLDR of all of this is that late last year, a company by the name of Positive Technologies uncovered a flaw in Intel's management engine that would allow people to gain access to computers using Intel's chips, which obviously is a metric ton of PCs. Obviously, Apple was also impacted by this, but the long and short of it is they have released patches that fix the issue in macOS High Sierra 10.13.3. You might say, okay, what did this vulnerability actually allow? Well, it basically allowed unsigned code to run on the PCH on any chipset from Skylake Gen and newer, and will basically allow attackers to implant spyware into the ME code. Will be visible to most traditional security codes, as the malware would be running on its own separate ME processor. Wouldn't even have any slowdown impact or anything like that, so you would have a real hard time of it even noticing that anything is wrong, and it would also not be wiped out by BIOS or OS updates. So this is a really nasty flaw. Now, Intel did confirm various CPUs to be vulnerable to this, and this 6th, 7th, 8th gen Intel Core, Intel Xeon, several of them, Intel Atom, Apollo Lake, 2 of them, and a couple of Celerons as well. So basically, if you are using a Apple machine, perhaps you're a creative, use it for Photoshop or Final Cut Pro or whatever. I do miss Final Cut Pro sometimes. That was a good editing software. Anyway, if you make use of a Mac for whatever reason, then they have patched it out on their end. So, some positive news for once. So, let's move on to the specs for Universal Flash Storage 3.0. Now, to this end, you can find a rather in-depth article by Paul himself in the description below this video on our website, which of course is redgamingtech.com. However, JDEC have released the specs for UFS 3.0. Now, obviously, Universal Flash Storage is used in a metric ton of technology, from everyday stuff like cameras and phones and to more complex devices, and obviously, as we are dealing with increasingly large amounts of data, obviously video, even, programs, all this sort of stuff is obviously just not getting any smaller anytime soon. So obviously storage needs to kind of keep up with the demands, not necessarily in terms of space as well, but also transfer speed. So yeah, space is important, as I just said, that files only seem to be getting larger, but obviously you want it to not take 10 years to transfer a file, so obviously transfer speeds are critical. And to this end, JDEC basically said that 3.0 will provide a, quote, 2 times performance increase over prior versions of the specification. So this is versus 2.0 or 2.1. This gives a maximum theoretical speed of 2.9 gigabytes a second. Now, we've also seen an increase in bandwidth versus 2.0 and 2.1, which had a maximum theoretical bandwidth of 1200 megabytes a second, and now with this update we have a theoretical maximum of 2900 megabytes a second combined. So we have 2 lanes, each capable of handling 1450 megabytes a second. Now, these are the most interesting changes, I would say, that's actually going to have an impact on everyday use for people such as myself and obviously you guys. However, there's also 2 key changes that are designed for the automotive markets. The first is extending the temperature range from -40 up to 105 degrees centigrade, which basically means it can be used in way harsher conditions, and also added a refresh operation with an added control mechanism, which basically improves data reliability, which is obviously very, very important. Now, there's a bunch of other tweaks, such as, power supply, lower power consumption, that sort of stuff. As I said, there is a link to our article in the description below this video. There's a lot of sort of nitty-gritty, small improvements here and there, but the main thing, as I said, we've got performance, and obviously the increase in bandwidth as well. So let's finish out the video, as I said, with some comments from Square Enix's CEO. Now, obviously, the words games as a service tends to leave a bad taste in people's mouths, and to be honest, I can't really blame people because it's not really been implemented brilliantly. We have seen it taken to extremely predatory extremes. So while it has its place if done well, we have seen games do it extremely well. My favourite example is Warframe, because not only is it a really good game, play Warframe by the way, it has one of the most fairest microtransaction systems for a free-to-play game just ever, or any game ever, to be honest. Like, the game that they have created for free is really good and with a really fair system as well. So it can be done right, but obviously it's very open to exploitation. However, I do have a bit of a statement here, as I said, from the Square Enix CEO, who of course is none other than Yosuke Matsuda. Now, he basically spoke in an interview with Edge magazine, and I'm going to include a link in the description below this video where you can purchase it if you so desire. However, you can obviously just go to any magazine shop ever, really. However, he said, quote, "I think a lot of the time when people hear the phrase games as a service, they always focus on the problem of microtransactions. They really close out the meaning to just being that. We look at it in a much broader sense. If you look at the idea of adding things to a game after release to keep it fresh and exciting, to keep people playing over a long time, and all the different ways you could do that, it comes to express a lot more. People are too focused on the problems." I just want to break from quote for a second, and he does have a point. You know, as I just said, games as a service isn't inherently bad, but as we have seen, it can be extremely exploitable, and we have seen with, you know, Star Wars Battlefront 2 is like the prime example of like the worst of the worst when it comes to that outside of mobile gaming, obviously. However, that isn't only the only thing rather that games as a service can mean. We can see it done well, as I've already said. However, he has reassured people that we're not going to be seeing Square Enix follow in EA's footsteps anytime soon. They probably weren't thinking about it anyway, but obviously the catastrophe that was Star Wars Battlefront 2, the backlash surrounding it, and the potential implications and consequences for EA have definitely would have made them go, actually, nah, I'll pass, thank you very much. However, he did say, quote, "We have been thinking about it. The downside of that is if we had one unified development platform, it would make it a lot harder to express the different characters, the different proclivities of our titles, we make a very broad range of games, and it might affect the variation we can get in there. I think a much better way of improving the efficiency of our development that is more fitting to the way we work is, rather than unifying everything on the same platform, to take all the different approaches the individual studios use and are very familiar with and have them exchange information about the tools and methods they use. In the process of unification, consolidation, there is obviously the trade-offs in terms of individuality, and I'd rather value that than the efficiency gains to be had from consolidation." So basically here he's talking about the fact that EA uses Frostbite in pretty much everything ever. And obviously it does make it easier working all from one platform. If you are stuck on what to do for this particular bug or issue or whatever, you can obviously just go to down to your friend Bob and say, "Hey Bob, can you help me?" And he'll be like, "Okay, cool." But obviously if you're working on different systems and you have different specialities and that sort of thing, it's not as easy to do that. But I kind of agree with him, to be honest. While obviously Frostbite is a good engine in terms of like it produces some really nice looking games, they all kind of look the same. It doesn't have as much variety as Square Enix definitely have, because they do produce a lot of different games. Yeah, they're famous for Final Fantasy, but that's not all they do by any means. So I can kind of agree with him, and I definitely think individuality, and creativity is definitely something that is not nurtured as much as it needs to be, especially in the AAA space. You know, we have kind of seen just games that have just felt like they weren't made by humans, that they'll put out by some sort of weird automaton, or just, you know, a corporation as a machine just pushing out this thing like, yep, it's ticking this box, ticking next box, this next box, okay, game of the year next. Like, that's not really what we want to see, and obviously those games don't tend to do well because you can really tell when it's just been made like it's on a production line. So I definitely appreciate Square Enix trying to encourage not only efficiency but obviously creativity and individuality within development, because obviously it is a creative industry at the end of the day, as much as some companies are trying to drive it to other regions, shall we say. Anyway, that has been done for this video. Thank you very much for watching. As I said, Paul will be back soon. I know you all have missed him very, very much. I'm sure he's missed you guys as well. I know he's itching to get back in front of the mic, so hopefully he'll be back soon. Thanks again, bye guys. Bye-bye.